Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of Artist Stories of Middle Georgia. I'm your host, Victor Rigoli, and I have a special guest with me today, Jim Thomas. Jim, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Sure, it's great to be here.
Yeah, we met several months ago. It might have been maybe late September, sometime around in
I
there. I
think it
think it
was.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that show down there at Greenlight Gallery, and I invited Logan to come and take a couple pictures for me and that kind of thing. And you came along, and we just struck up a conversation and talked about and looked at some of your artwork, and I was just so blown away about your watercolor, your art. And when we started doing the little podcast and everything, I was thinking about, I need to get Jim on there. And that's when Hazel Caldwell and I were doing it. And we've had lunch since then. I think it was back in January, but we need to do it on a more frequent basis and everything, and talk art and what have you. But I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. I want to hear. Yeah, I want to hear your artist story. Every artist has their story. How did they get started? How long you've been painting, what motivated you. I mean, even if it started off when you were 2 years old or whatever, or maybe 2 years ago. It doesn't really matter. But I'm gonna let you kind of tell the audience a little bit about who you are. You're there in the Macon, Georgia area. Some people call it the 478. But just kind of tell a little bit about who you are, what your medium is. We talked about watercolor, that kind of thing, and just kind of go from there. And I'll ask a few questions along the way as well.
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And I want to thank you for actually calling me an artist. In many ways, I sometimes consider myself an artist wannabe. But
imposter, as we sometimes are.
Exactly.
Am I really a true artist?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know how you're your own worst critic.
Oh yeah.
But so I've been making my whole life. I was raised here, and
now I was snooping around. Did you graduate Mount DeSales in 1974? Not giving away your age. I graduated Southwest High School 75, 50 years. Wow. We're just a year apart in age. It's hard to believe.
That's the dark ages, man. What?
Pre-social media and cell phones.
Yeah,
and technology.
Absolutely.
Where we actually got out and socialized with people.
Real socialized. Yeah,
really.
But I graduated here from Mount DeSales back in '74, and went on to college at UGA, studied landscape architecture. Go Dogs! And studied landscape architecture, and came back and worked for the planning commission for P&Z for 37 years, and then retired 3 years ago. So,
oh my gosh, I've been retired 3 years ago this month. At the end of this month, it'll be 3 years ago. So we have so much in common. I'm sorry, keep going.
I know, but I mean, I've been messing around in art since I was just a kid. I mean, my mom would give me a box of crayons and a pad of paper just to keep me busy, and she was successful doing that.
Yeah.
And I was always dabbling, here and there. And of course, when I went off to school, it was really graphic intensive. So, I was doing a lot of work in school. I took as many art courses as I could as electives at Georgia.
Right.
I had the figure drawing courses and the painting courses, and even took a calligraphy course to improve my lettering.
Oh,
because
wow.
you
probably have excellent penmanship, right?
Well, when the keyboard took over, you lose all that. But
I know.
That was before there was CAD, computer aided drafting and design.
Right,
so it was all done by hand. So that will also put me in the dark ages. So I've always been around art and graphic work most of my life, and I always enjoyed just kind of putzing around with it. But I never, for various reasons, mainly just trying to raise a family, make a living, never really did a deep dive. I knew I could never make a living doing
You're
the
right.
art, so it
Right.
became a hobby slash recreational thing. But a few years back, well, more than a few years, my wife gave me as a birthday present some actual art lessons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I took
There in Macon, somewhere in Macon.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was at Wesleyan College.
Oh, okay.
One of the adult courses there, and I can't remember the teacher's name, but she was really good. And that kind of gets you juiced up about it. So I started doing it a little bit more, and so then when I retired, you have more time to mess with it, and so I've
Oh,
been able
yeah. Yeah.
to spend more time doing it. But the challenge with retirement is you get so many other things that you want to do,
That
especially in the
or your
creative
honeydew
field.
list gets in the
Oh
way,
yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, I love woodworking. I've got a nice shop that I can go to,
Okay.
and so I do photography. So I have a lot of outlets
Right.
going right now.
Well, that's pretty cool. Um, the, now you were on the planning and zoning for what, 37 years, you said?
37 years. Yeah. In the last
Wow.
13
Wow.
years, I was the executive director, so I was the
Okay.
one
Okay.
taking all the
I,
heat.
yeah, I want to have a side conversation one day with you about how planning and zoning works, especially on Robbins. But anyway,
Well,
that's a sore subject with me. But anyway, yeah,
yeah, with a lot of
yeah.
people, I'm sure.
Oh, I know. So, tell me about your watercolor painting. How did you get into that? I mean, you did some crayon stuff younger. You took some art lessons and
Yeah,
everything. Was that in watercolor when you took those
it
lessons?
was. It was. I was just drawn to watercolor mainly because I just enjoyed the transparency and the liveliness of the pigments, and it was easy because it was water based.
Right.
But that's what I thought. Then I learned that watercolor is a challenge
It's
because
difficult. Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
paint in reverse. You can't really paint white on. You have to leave
Right.
the
Right.
paper behind to see the
It's
white.
a
And
different way of thinking about and
it is.
approaching your subject because with I do oils and we've talked about that and it's like okay well you have white paint that I can add in there to change the value or whatever
Right.
of a color or just add some white for the waves and that kind of thing and it's like man I'd have to really think about that. It says okay the waves crashing but let's leave an area a white for that foam. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a challenge. That's a challenge.
it
Would
is.
be for me.
It, and of course, it's hard to correct mistakes. So
Can't wipe it off and start
yeah.
over, right?
I
It's
mean,
done.
there are a few tricks that you can deploy, but mostly if you mess up,
You're
you're
done.
screwed. So, but and that was, but that's one of the reasons why I liked it was the spontaneity of it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You kind of have to get it right the first time.
Right.
And of course, to me, one of the biggest challenges that I'm still working on it is knowing when to stop. And you know,
Yeah,
uh,
I can relate to that.
yeah,
When is it done?
yeah,
Done,
you keep kind of nibbling away at it, and it's like
Put the brush down. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
hmm Yeah.
But I've tried
So
other mediums, and
have you? Have you
I've
tried
done.
acrylic?
I have not tried acrylic. Well, actually, I
Okay.
did many years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
I tried some pastels, and I still have some
Oh,
pastels.
okay.
And I want to try oil painting. That's one of the things I like to give it a
Look,
shot. And,
here's what we need to do. I need to come to your house at your convenience in your environment. I mean, I'm open to this. Hopefully, you are. I'm an
sure.
oil painter. You're watercolor. I want to learn a little bit about watercolor because I know it's challenging because it's a little intimidating for me, but it's something I want to attempt to do and learn. And then maybe we could kind of trade some secrets. I can share some things about oil painting and things
Oh
of
man, that'd
that
be great.
nature.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
we can just kind of okay here's what I know, this is what I've learned, here's the way to start process that I go through, that kind of thing. So
absolutely. That'd be fun.
And sometimes I just learn from just watching artists. I mean, sometimes they feel intimidated because somebody, yeah.
Well, it's like,
So,
I'm a visual
okay.
learner, surprise. If you show me how to do it, I can make it happen. But, I have a lot of books that are, a lot of art books, how to do this, how to do that. And that
Right.
is not as good as just sitting with somebody and watching them, do a demo or whatever, and picking up some skills.
Asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that's key. I purchased a tutorial video from PaintTube. I've got a couple others from them, and it's a streaming thing, and oil painting. And this one lady, she had a video out there, and it was like painting figures from photographs. If like she's
Hmm.
working from a photograph, and what she does is she puts it in black and white, and she paints in color. So she's just using her mind to come up with these colors.
Right.
But the thing I didn't like about it is she went for about 10 or 15 minutes and she didn't say a word. She was just painting, and it's like, well, why are you applying that color? Why did you mix it this way? Or
Right.
here's what I'm doing. I want to hear somebody say, oh, okay, I got to make sure I got the highlight here on the boy's hair. I'm using this color, da, da, da. And I just requested a refund because it's like, I can watch that on YouTube,
Right.
just watch somebody paint and not say
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
not really learning. I think a tutorial is you're teaching me how to do something. So I like being in person, and sometimes a one-on-one is better because you feel more comfortable asking questions,
Oh,
you know?
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's I feel the same way that I mean, it's one thing just to watch somebody do it, but if they kind of explain while they go along, it just is another level of expertise that you can pick up.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I signed up for a couple of courses on Domestika. Are you familiar with that?
No. Oh,
It's an
yes. Yes, I
it's
am. Yes, I
Yeah, it's an
am. Uh-huh.
online thing,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
they're pretty good. I've had a few dogs in there, but they're if you
Yeah.
pick the right
Yeah.
artist and the right medium, they're not bad.
Reasonably priced, I think,
Yeah,
some of
yeah,
them are,
they're not
$10
expensive.
or less. So
Yeah.
yeah, pretty good.
So let's see. So that's really basically it. I mean, I don't paint as much as I'd like to because, like I said, I've got other things going
Other
on.
things going on.
But
Yeah.
it's but even when I do a painting, I like to build my own frames, do my own matting, and that sort of stuff. I used to pay
Yeah.
people to do that, and it just I just have the time now to do it. So I figured,
Right.
just do it
Yeah, I want
yourself.
to see your workshop. We need to set up a lunch date, and I want to see your workshop because,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and how you build frames. Because I've built a few floater frames, for
Yeah.
some of my stuff, and I'm experimenting with that. But I'll go down to Goodwill and I'll see a frame, and I always have a measuring tape in my pocket because it's like, okay, I need 11 by 14, a 9 by 12 or
Yep.
whatever, and so I'll see something, and it's like, oh, okay, well, it's 3 or 4 or $5 or whatever, and I can fix it up, either
Oh yeah.
some pretty good shape, or I can put a coat of black paint on it or a different color
Hmm.
paint. And I've got this way that I can do what's called kind of an antique look to it using
Hmm.
some different colors. I have to share that with you someday, but anyway, yeah, I'm able to do that, and yeah, I just like to see some of the stuff that you make, as far as your frames go, and I think it's a cheaper
Absolutely.
way to do it, for
It
sure.
is. I mean,
Yeah.
and the ones that I make, I use scrap wood that I have just left over from some other
Right.
project, and you
Right.
cut it down and make it work. But I also like to do what you do with scavenge frames, and I'm all the
Oh
time
yeah.
looking,
Yeah.
even 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 at Home Goods. I go back to the cheap art section and check out the frames and see
Yep.
what they like because you can pick up something for 10, $15, and it's
Exactly.
just for the
Exactly.
frame.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I do like repurposing frames that you find at flea markets and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm all the time. If there's one in the neighborhood, I'm cruising through and says, well, they got $3 on it. Yeah, I could probably
Right.
use it. I've taken 8 by 10 frames, and sometimes I've found some 10 by 13 frames, and it's just a thin, half-inch wide wood frame. Okay.
Uh-huh.
But I've added to it and glued to it a piece that's like 2 to 3 inches wide all the way around it, and put some trim around it, and
Mhm.
painted it and everything. So it made the frame wider, even though it's almost like it's matted, but it's
Yeah.
still a wooden
Yeah.
frame, but it's not just the real thin, piece. I've done that before. They've turned out pretty good, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I
What?
finally got halfway decent at cutting glass. It's, I have wasted so
Oh,
much glass trying to.
so you know how to cut glass? Oh,
Well, I
perfect.
mean, I can cut a straight line, but
Okay. Well, here's the deal. I was telling my wife this the other day, and one of the reasons I go to Goodwill is I have a palette that I made. It's a piece of glass, 18 by 24, and I spray paint one side a flat gray color. It's
hmm
almost like a what they call it primer color, I guess.
right,
Gray.
right. Yeah.
And I built a little box for it. It's about an inch and a half deep and about a quarter inch or three-quarters of an inch wide, little frame and everything. And it just sits down inside that. And I've cleaned it so many times with a razor blade and scraping the paint off. I'm getting scratches in it and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like eventually it's going to break. So I've got to find me a piece of wood, or not wood, but glass. It's that size. Or now that I know you can cut some glass, I might find a 20 by 24 and cut it down, just a straight line here, break it off, and straight line there and break it off, kind of thing. But hey, I'm going to keep you in mind for that. Hey,
Absolutely. It's
hey, Jim, I need a piece of glass cut. Yeah.
anytime.
All right.
I've got a close friend who is actually a stained glass artist. He does stained
Yeah,
glass.
you were telling me about that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Pat Madison. He's a friendly actor, lives just down the street from me. But he showed me how to actually do it. And the first thing he said was, he said, "Quit buying those cheap cutters at Lowe's and get
Gotcha.
a real glass cutter
The
that,
real glass
yeah,
cutter.
that's got the
Yeah.
right
One
kind
that
of,
works. Yeah.
yeah, yeah." And so that, yeah,
Yeah.
I did that, and it did help.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. If I can just get something, just kind of trim it down on one side, an inch or two or whatever it is, and just fit right into that. Because I could possibly just lay it on top of the existing glass, but I don't think it'll move too much because normally what I do is I try to glue it in just a little bit of maybe some Elmer's or something like that just
hmm
to keep, because it's usually pretty tight in there,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but yeah, I like painting off of glass. But yeah.
Okay, I've never. Yeah, yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. And with
And I
the
see a lot
gray,
of
it's kind of a neutral color.
glass palettes for oil
Mhm.
paint. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
When I first started, of course, it was the watching the old Bob Ross,
Oh,
videos and
sure. Oh, yeah,
stuff, and he
yeah.
he had the old palette he'd have in his hand, and he'd get his paint, and so I tried that. I even made some of those wood. I couldn't do it. I can't hold this thing up, the whole time. And I said, I
Yeah.
built my own, put it on the little table, and it works great. I love it. So
See, I go
yeah.
back and forth on that. I've got like a John Pike palette that is, big, it's like, I don't know, 18 by 12 or something, and with big reservoirs and a big mixing area. And I just put that on my table. But sometimes I like holding a small palette, depending on the size of the painting. If I'm painting off of uh, uh, using tubes, I'll put them in the big palette. But if I'm doing something small, I'll use a very small palette just because I don't know, it's easier to hold and kind of just lean into the painting. And
Okay.
uh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you mostly sit when you're painting or standing? Do you sit at a little easel?
Normally I sit just because I've got such crummy knees,
Uh huh.
but I do stand occasionally depending on the size of the work.
Gotcha.
I normally
Gotcha.
paint at with the medium at an angle.
Gotcha.
Um, you can probably see behind me that the angle on the table, but
Yeah, I can see your
um,
table back there. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And sometimes I'll paint flat, just to do something different. Sometimes I don't tape the paper down and just. I've seen some videos with some incredible artists that don't tape their paper down and rotate the paper as they paint,
Oh wow.
and do it. And it's kind of like that old thing about drawing on the right side of your brain,
Uh
painting
huh.
what you see, not what you think you see.
Right.
And that helps you
Right.
do that. I've seen it. I watched a guy paint from a photograph. I can't remember who it was, but it was a YouTube video. But he put the photograph upside down and he painted the painting upside down
Oh, wow.
because it forced him to paint what he saw, not what he thought he saw. And then so he finished,
Ah,
he turned it around and said, "Oh my God, it's incredible."
I may try that.
That's an
I do
old that's an old
everything.
trick. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I've heard about that, and I've also heard of people saying, "Hey, take a mirror and hold it up there, so many feet away, and then look at your painting in the mirror because it reverses everything,
yeah,
and then you can kind of see it from a different perspective and
yeah.
everything." And I always, try to do the 6 foot rule or 7 foot rule or whatever, step back 6 or 7 feet, take a look at, where you're at. And
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I mostly stand at my easel, cause I'm doing anything from, 10 by 10 all the way up to 18 by 24 or
Yeah,
larger. And so I usually stand. Now, I do have some smaller easels. If I'm working on something like a 5 by 7, I'll just sit, and it's so much easier to just
yeah,
sit and do
yeah, yeah,
that. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So what do you find the most challenging of doing watercolor painting? We talked about got to be careful making mistakes and white. Is there anything else that comes along
Oh
with that?
gosh, there's so much. One of the big challenges is to how to not make mud. It's so easy
Yep.
to,
Yep.
if you don't mix the right uh, colors, the right paint, it'll just turn to mud. And
Right.
you know, part of watercolor is that you would you put down layers, and you have to be careful with that because you don't want to make it too opaque. That's a
Hmm.
real challenge. And certain
Hmm.
pigments are more opaque than others, and
Right. Right.
so you have to kind of figure out, okay, that's not going to work here. Let's go to another blue, or whatever.
Right.
Um, uh, and the other thing is, I spend a lot of time what I call painting pretty pictures, which is fine. It's fun, but I want to be more impressionistic, more
Uh-huh.
loose, you know.
Uh-huh.
And
Same
so
here. Yep.
I've done a few exercises where you give yourself 5 minutes. Okay, you got to
Hmm.
finish this painting in 5 minutes. So you reduce your brush strokes, and you don't spend a lot of time mixing. You use more primaries, and um, and that's just a way to kind of get loosened up. And
Right.
I'm not there yet, so
I like that idea. Yeah.
yeah,
I
it's a
always
journey. It's a
it
journey.
it is. It is. I mean, I'm not a photorealistic painter, and I'm not a very impressionistic, kind of Van Gogh kind of thing. And
Yeah,
somewhere in between, there's some realism there.
yeah,
But I'm trying to get away from having a whole lot of detail in the foreground with a whole lot of blades of grass or whatever the case may be. And I
right.
was talking with Tammy, my wife, about it. And I said, I want to loosen up. And I was talking to my son. He's up at UGA, and I said, I sent him a couple photos of what I was looking at and the style that I liked. And I said, it's brush strokes and there's colors, and it's the grass of the marsh, but you don't have to have individual blades of grass, to
Right.
know that, because your eye, when you look at it, that, hey, that's grass, and your mind will tell you, hey, yeah, of course there's blades of grass, but you don't have to have all the individual blades of
Yeah,
grass. So trying to loosen up a little bit with that. Yeah.
it
It's
is so
challenging for
cool.
me.
It is so cool to convince somebody that that's a a sawgrass along the water,
Right.
when in fact all it is a few brush strokes,
Yeah. Yeah.
properly
Yeah.
placed. And and if you get
Exactly.
up close to it, you go, what is that? But you back away from
You
it,
got to back
and
away and
it,
take it in. And
it's clearly,
it's, it's clear. Yeah.
yeah,
Most definitely. Yeah.
yeah.
Do
And
you
it's
sell,
sorry.
do you sell some of your work? Have you been able to sell any of your
Oh
work or
gosh,
show some of your work?
I haven't sold anything in a long time, only because I haven't
Okay.
tried. Um, I've done a few. I had some paintings that I donated to some fundraisers
Right.
at Mount DeSales actually a while back. I've done a few commissions. They were not good experiences, so I don't
That's
do
a
commissions
challenge doing
anymore.
commissions.
It
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
you have to get the right person that that you can g-haul with. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I did some of those for a while, but not many. But most of my painting is, I don't know. I guess personal. Is if I have had a lot of people that say you need to sell your work. You need to get make prints, sell and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I guess I could, but I just haven't made that deep dive. And that's
Yeah,
another whole thing in the art world is
it is. It
how
really is.
to sell and price your
Yeah,
work and how to get
it
your
is.
name out there and all
Yeah.
that. And maybe I'll get there, but I've never. Again, I'm my worst critic, so I look at it and go, well, "Gosh, no one's going to buy that."
Right. Right.
But then people come look at it and go, "God, can I get a copy of that?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I find that common. I've done several of these now, and even just talking with different artists, we are our worst critic. It's like, I feel like we're an imposter. Am I really an artist? Yeah, I sold some things,
right.
but kind of thing. And it's like, no, a lot of artists are that way. And you're right when it comes to marketing. I've done some seminars and webinars and listened in on some stuff. And I mean, you've got to be spending, 20% of your time a week on social media and trying to get your work, in a gallery or somewhere. And then two, there are print on demand services out there, but you got to
Hmm.
constantly be uploading new work and, taking some good quality photos. And it's a job in
Yeah,
itself.
and
I mean, it
that's
really is.
and
Yeah.
that's one thing that's kind of held me back from it because I don't want it to be a job.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
when it's a job, it's no
Yeah.
fun
It's no fun.
or
Yeah.
not as fun. So
Right.
it's not, if I were a younger man, maybe, but
Uh huh.
that's not my gig right now.
Yeah, I don't want to work anymore, and that is work.
Yeah.
Now, creating art can be work. I mean, it
Oh
is a
yeah.
different kind of work. I mean, and there's a different process you go through in creating. I'm sure a lot of people don't understand that you just don't put paper down and then whoop, 20 minutes later you got this beautiful painting and all that. There's a lot that goes on. What I'll say, behind the scenes and prep for putting paint on the canvas or on the paper, so it's coming up with a composition. If you're painting from a photo, what works, what doesn't work, am I going to add this or take that out, this kind of thing.
Right.
And there's a lot that goes into it. Like sometimes I don't know so much with watercolor. I know with acrylic and also with oil, some artists like to tone their canvas, and I've started doing that too, to get rid of the
Hmm.
white canvas. And then
Right.
two, some of the earthy tones I use, it just brings out the vibrancy of the colors,
Uh-huh.
in the
Uh-huh.
painting. And so all that factors into, I haven't even applied the actual paint to the painting yet, but you're doing all that. And I like to, I've built stretcher bars and stretch canvas and
Hmm.
gessoed it and all this kind of stuff. And, that was one of the things I was talking about in my show back in September is, hey, when you buy something from me, chances are I've done it all, including
Right.
possibly building the frame, and people don't
Right.
realize that. And they says, oh, okay, you want $400 for this? And say, yeah, but I
Yeah,
built the
exactly.
stretcher bars, I stretched the canvas, I gessoed it, I painted, I did the frame, I did, there's a lot of work, could
Not
be
to mention
15,
the
20
materials,
hours
and not
in
to mention
just in
materials.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Well,
And that's a challenge too.
I always figured if I started selling paintings, it would be mainly just to feed my hobby. That
Yeah.
I would have
Yeah.
no desire to
Yeah.
make it a business. But if I can offset
Yeah.
some of the costs of materials and stuff, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And materials are expensive. All these supplies, materials that we use. And then I'm fearful with the tariffs and everything as to what's going to happen with,
Yeah, I know.
some of the materials, because some that I get, some of the companies, the materials manufactured in France or some other places,
Hmm.
some are in the United States. I use Gamblin oil paint sometimes, and it's in Portland, Oregon, which is
Right.
good.
Right.
But then like some of the Windsor Newton stuff is in France. So it's like,
Right.
okay, stock up now before. And as you know, since COVID, it seems like everything's just going up and up and up and up and up. And so, yeah, it's
No, materials
crazy.
have gotten insanely expensive, and in fact, I was in Savannah for a couple of weeks not long ago, and I made my pilgrimage to Dick Blick's, art supply
Oh, yeah.
down
Oh,
there.
yeah.
And
Been there.
um,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, you can't get out of there without spending $200-300.
Oh, I know. I know. I can't go in there. My wife won't let me go in there. So, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, it's like buying tools. You shouldn't buy cheap tools. 'Cause
Exactly.
you
You
need to
get what
buy
you pay
good
for.
quality
Yeah,
stuff because
you do.
it'll last.
It will last.
It's archival
Yeah.
and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've got tools for my dad. I mean, my woodworking, most of it. I mean, I got a table saw and a bandsaw that I got from my dad when he
me too.
passed away,
Me
and
too.
I use it. I think about him every time I, cut a piece of wood. You know
I
what I
know.
mean?
I
But
inherited all my dad's tools, and
yeah.
I've got his table saw that is, I think he bought it like in the mid '60s, and
Oh, okay.
it still hums
Still
right
good.
along. Yeah,
My dad had the craftsman tools, and so
yeah,
back when
that's what he had.
Sears was the big,
Yeah,
and
it was the only game in town,
it,
really.
it it was. So it's the craftsman bandsaw, table saw, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
My brother got his miter saw. I doubt. I know he doesn't even use it. I'm surprised he hadn't said, "Victor, come get this" or whatever. But I bought my own a few years ago for Father's
Mhm.
Day gift to myself. But
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah. But anyway, are there any artists that you admire or are inspired by their work?
Oh gosh, yeah. Of course, all the classic guys, but
Hmm.
there are um, there are a slew of watercolor artists that are really talented and are like Joseph Zubik. He's actually I'm not really he's European. I don't know where he's from exactly. I like a lot of the British guys. Andrew Pitt, David Taylor. Um, there's a bunch of them. I kind of lean towards um, landscape painters uh,
Okay.
and seascapes, waterscapes, and that's kind of where my sweet spot is. I struggle to do, and I don't do portraits and that sort of thing. I'm just not that talented to do that and have it, pull it off.
Right.
But um, but yeah, it's amazing to me how many really good artists are out there that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
go under the radar,
Oh yeah.
even locally. I mean, there are a lot of folks out there that are really talented that you never would have known um, that they were producing beautiful art.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's one of the main reasons I wanted to start this podcast of artist stories of Middle Georgia, because I've met so many artists recently in the last couple of months or so, and I think just from having that show back almost a year ago really helped with that. But I've gone to some events at Macon Arts Alliance. They've got a thing
Hmm.
going on this Friday that Tammy and I are going to, their 40th anniversary, and I know some other artists are going to be there.
I think they're having a
And
watercolor, just a couple of watercolor guys there.
they
I think there's
probably are. There's
three.
going to be,
Yeah.
yeah, various artists. I met an artist recently. She's got her own studio now. It's down on Poplar Street, just at the corner of Poplar and let's see, that's Second Street. Her name is Jeannie Lane Sheridan of the Sheridan family and
No,
Macon, the
sure.
realtor
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. Yeah.
I met her several weeks ago. I've had her on the podcast, but just talented people, and it's like you got to get out and you start meeting these people, and it's like you're right, they're under the radar, and so
Hmm.
I just want to share their stories and get them some exposure in some way, because one of the great things about doing this on YouTube and Facebook and stuff like that, especially YouTube, I can create what's called little shorts, and they're 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, a minute and a half long, and they can get thousands of views, and it's just unbelievable. I mean, I did something with Kara Hurd, and within 10 minutes, I had over 200 and something views. I mean, it just went crazy. But I have interviewed Julie Wilkerson, the executive director of Macon Arts Alliance. She's been on the podcast, and a few other artists. And yeah, it's just, I'm looking forward to Friday because there's some artists I want to kind of seek out and get to know and get them on, the podcast, because it's like, well, I never knew you existed. And that's the hard thing about Middle Georgia is there's so many, but there's nothing really that, how do you contact and get the word out and just bring all these people together, maybe as a socializing, networking event,
They're
so
out
maybe
there.
one day I can create that, but we'll see.
But
Yeah.
this kind of podcast is really good for that purpose, because I mean I can give you several names of folks that would
Please do.
love to come in and
Yeah.
just chat and
Please
I mean, there's some amazing artists out there that there's a girl that I went to high school with, and I ran into her at a reunion, and we just happened to be chatting, and she's doing watercolor, and it's just amazing. So
wow.
I'll give you her name, but
she's in the middle, and she's in the Macon area still.
Yeah, she's in Milledgeville, so
Milledgeville. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So if they're in Forsyth, Milledgeville, Perry, all around this area, 50 miles or so. In fact, my wife knows somebody she went to school with. They're down in I think Jessup, Georgia. She likes to paint. It's a friends from high school, and she's an artist and everything. She said, will you just interview people from the Middle Georgia area? Because she was telling me about her friend. And I says, well, I could get her on the podcast sometime, and just say, hey, found out about this person down here. Because eventually I would like to branch out, and here's artist stories of Georgia, the Southeast, and all that kind of stuff, because you just got so many artists, and we have so much in common. We just like, we're learning from each other and talking about things that are going on and what we struggle with and the challenges and that kind of thing, and what we might be successful at. And so that's the whole purpose, so. Well,
and I think it's important to get engaged. For the longest time, I wasn't really engaged with the art community. I had just, your schedule that allowed you to get really involved. But I recently have joined, I've joined the Georgia Watercolor Society, the American Watercolor Society.
That's good.
The local groups, and I think that's important, just to network and just learn what's out there. And
because you can learn from and find out about certain workshops that might be in your area or within a reasonable amount of time driving, so if there was something in Atlanta, you're an hour and a half away, you can go up there and do that kind of thing, which is good.
Or you can spend a lot of money and go to Italy for a week.
I know there's some artists that I follow. One, he's very photorealistic. I've got a couple of his tutorials. One is on well, maybe more than that. I've got one that's on portraits and one is on the ocean. But anyway, Andrew Tischler, he's in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I love his work, and he's been painting for like 20-something years. But he was doing I got an email the other day, and he was saying, hey, come and do some plein air workshops, and you get to stay in this apartment complex and blah, 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 and all this. I mean, thousands of dollars to do that, And then there was one I follow, Chris Fornatera. I think he's out in California, and I've really learned a lot from him. But he said, hey, come with me, and we're going to Italy. And it's like, man, I just don't have that kind of money. It'd be nice if I had a rich uncle that would just say, hey, you want to go? Here's $5,000, whatever, kind of thing. Yeah. And if I had an art business that was producing, $20,000 a month, from print sales and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. What's $5,000 in the whole scheme of things? But yeah. I'd like to get there. One of the goals that I have, Tammy's continuing to work at the Farm Bureau, and she's talked about, in about 4 years, retiring, 3 or 4 years. And I thought, well, if I could push myself to really crank out some good quality work and also get the print business going and having that steady income from that coming in, then we might be able to move to the coast. But we'll see.
You go. Yeah, that's a good goal. Yeah, my wife is from Savannah, so we spend a lot of
Oh,
time down in Savannah, and it's a cool place, obviously.
well, do you do any plein air painting with
You know,
watercolor?
I do, but most of my work is in the studio, painting from
Yeah.
photographs. Um, in fact, when I retired, my staff gave me a complete plein air kit with the easel and all kind of cool
Oh,
stuff.
okay.
And when the weather is good, I don't like standing out in the hot sun in the middle of
Or the
July in
cold,
Macon,
you
Georgia.
know.
Or the
Yeah, I
cold.
know.
Um,
Yeah,
so you have to be kind of choosy about that. But
yeah.
it's just comfortable being at your easel and um, more in control. There's no weather. There's no wind.
Perfect environment, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Yeah, I've done a little bit. I took a workshop last year up in Eatonton, Georgia, and it was pretty cool. But it's just so much setup, in
yeah.
it, and sometimes it's like, oh crap, I forgot to bring this, or
Right.
yeah, it'd be nice if I had that, and I just don't have things at my fingertips, and I'm out of my element. And I've taken some lessons before in somebody else's studio or work area, and it's like, yeah, I'm just not comfortable.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
easel, the setup. I was forced kind of to sit down, and I really like to stand up, and yeah, it was just so different. But I'm I need to get out, and you're right. April, May time frame, and about October, November, December is a good time frame, but because those
Right.
summer months and winter months are, it's a bit too cold for me. But I know of artists and seen them out there with, about frostbit fingers doing some stuff.
Oh, I know.
More power to you.
I follow guys on
Yeah,
YouTube that do that. I'm just amazed that
yeah.
I learned a new term, hybrid artist.
Ah,
Hybrid, yeah, they go out plein air and they start in plein air, but they come back to the studio and finish it.
I'm finishing up.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's an
yeah,
idea. That's an idea. It's too
yeah,
hot. I'm melting. I'm going back to the
yeah,
studio.
yeah.
Yeah. There was another question about that I had in my mind. We were talking about doing plein air stuff. But anyway, maybe it'll come to me in a minute. But yeah.
And
Um,
let me ask you:
yeah.
do you only work in oil? Is that your only medium?
I have done a little bit in gouache. Last fall, I started doing some gouache, and I know I could water it down a little bit to be more like watercolor,
Hmm.
but it is a lot like, it's almost a combination. In my opinion, it's kind of a combination of acrylic watercolor,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, yeah.
And what I did with it was I created greeting cards, some birthday
Hmm.
cards, Christmas. At Christmas, I did a set of Christmas cards for a friend of mine who ordered 30 of them. And, they're not cheap, to be honest,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
even if it's a 3 by 4 inch card, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it.
Sure.
But I really enjoyed it. And then I also did for everybody the name tags for the gifts. I
Hmm.
did, something related to Christmas, and some of them I did like Charlie Brown or whatever, because I'm not selling it. And it was just kind of cute,
Sure. Yeah.
for us to them and that kind of thing. But yeah, I need to get back into that, and I have tried to do a little bit with acrylic. And I have used acrylic to do kind of a toning of the canvas because you can
Hmm.
put oil on top of acrylic, but you can't do the
Right.
opposite of that. And then I've I want to get more into kind of an abstract looking landscape from what
Hmm.
I've been doing. And I've got some pictures that I came across that I want to use as an example and learn from. And I thought, I could possibly do this more in acrylic than in oil painting, so.
Hmm.
But then, too, I wanted to thicken up my oil paint, and I found out about some cold wax that I can use and mix in, and it's kind of clunky, and I could apply it on there to give more texture to the
Right.
canvas and everything.
Yeah.
So I
Use
may
a
do
palette
that.
knife or yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that
So I'm
interesting
going to
how
experiment a little bit.
yeah, if you're probably like me, you get bored with what you're doing, and so
Yep.
you venture out into something else that then
Yeah.
true to all these other things. And
Yeah.
I love painting boats. Just I don't know why.
You
They just
do an excellent job on painting boats. I love your boat scenes.
after a while you
Yeah.
get tired of painting boats, so you
That's
have
right.
to find something
Yeah.
else. So
Yeah.
venture out, different
Yeah.
medium, different subject matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My wife tells me, you need to paint something more than the marshland or a seascape. I said, I know, babe. And so I've tried to do that a little bit. I have done
Hmm.
still landscape, but I'll put some architecture in it, buildings in it, that kind of thing, some boats in it. I was working on some sailboats
Hmm.
recently. So I'm trying to work on that a little bit, and also doing some more still life stuff, fruit, vegetable, whatever kind of thing, just to kind of shake it up and learn a little bit. But yeah, not to do the standard old, marshland, because that gets boring after a while.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Even though it's
yeah.
a nice piece of work and it's
Oh,
beautiful, after a while,
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
I need to paint something else. Yeah.
yeah. But then there are artists that's all they do.
Yeah.
I'll see stuff on Instagram or whatever and say, oh, I like their work. And I go to their website and it's like, it's all the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Marshlands or seascapes, whatever. There's nothing different.
Yeah.
But they're real good at it and they're successful at it. But it's just like, you know,
I
yeah,
love these artists. It's amazing. These artists will, we paint those scenes, those march scenes, because they're reminiscent of a good time.
yeah,
They're unique. They're
yeah.
unique and all. But I'm amazed at the artists that can find some out of the way, nowhere, nothing that produces beautiful painting of a brick wall with a bicycle next to it or something.
I know. There's so many artists. They're so freaking creative.
And
It's
that's
like,
the
how
art of
did you think of
that.
that?
That's the art of seeing. That's you have to that's
Visualizing
yeah,
and
yeah,
putting it on canvas.
yeah.
Yeah,
That you see that little thing, you think that will make a good painting, and
yeah, yeah.
I don't have that talent yet. So
Me either. I can relate to that, Jim, so
yeah.
much because I'm in different Facebook groups. There's some that are free reference photos for artists, or landscape
Hmm.
photos for artists. And,
Yeah,
I'm looking out there and I'll see somebody post, hey, thanks. I'll just use your name. Thanks, Jim Thomas, for your photo. It inspired me to paint this picture.
uh-huh.
And it's like, oh my gosh, how did you come up with that for the sky
Yeah,
and the composition of the
yeah,
water? And it's like, I would have never thought of doing that. It's
right.
like how they're just so thinking outside the box and trying
Yeah,
different things, different colors.
yeah.
It's like it's amazing. Yeah, it's
One
amazing.
thing that I started doing, well, it's been a while. I've done it for a while. Everybody's got a cell phone that takes great photographs, and I have that.
Right.
But also, I carry a camera whenever I'm
Oh, you
out.
do? Yeah.
Yeah, I like to shoot in what's called RAW format that you can then
Uh-huh.
edit the photos easier.
Right.
And because I like photography by itself, but I also use it to paint from. Um, and so I'm always on the lookout for something new and interesting that would be a good subject matter.
Well, going down to Savannah, there's all kinds of subject matters down there for
Oh,
sure.
it's sensory overload.
Even sidewalks with doors and buildings and the
Oh
different
yeah,
colors and just
yeah,
that pink house that's down there and
yeah.
the Forsyth, what is it, Forsyth Park down
Side
there and the
Park, sure.
fountain and
Yeah,
everything and cobblestone streets and River Street and all that. So I would love to try to use some of your photos, if with your permission, to
sure.
try to paint from, and say, oh wow, even if it's some boats or something like that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, man, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed the, gosh, almost 50 minutes here that we've been talking, and time
Oh
has just
wow,
flown by, and just
that's
talking about
incredible.
talking shop, talking art, that kind of thing, getting to
Yeah.
know you better, getting to know about your artist story here. But it's been a pleasure, and thanks again for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, my
Just want to,
pleasure.
yeah, if people want to get in touch with you and inquire about your artwork, how would they do that? Do you have an email address or Facebook page or anything like that?
I don't have a Facebook page.
Okay,
I'm on Facebook, and you
okay,
can hit me up there.
okay,
And I think my email is on that Facebook as
okay,
well.
okay. With your permission, I'd like to include maybe your Facebook page and your email in the show notes
Sure.
description,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that, hey, if you want to get in touch with Jim, see some of his work, or contact him
yeah.
about something, they can reach out to you there. And I'll just include
Absolutely.
that because I've got your email, and I'll check out your Facebook page as well. But thanks again. And folks, thanks for tuning in today and joining us on the podcast. It's been great. Appreciate you watching the video and everything. Please like and subscribe to the channel. There's more content coming out. Got a couple more interviews lined up next week that I'm excited about. And just take care, everybody. And thanks again, Jim. And we'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, Victor.